Does bathing in Dead Sea salt at home measurably help with eczema? Without the sun, without the bromine-rich air, without the whole ecosystem around it? This question was left open in the last video, and that's exactly what we are going to take a closer look at today. Hi, I'm Stefan Rieder, and I've been dealing with eczema, atopic dermatitis, and acne since I was a child. Over almost 20 years, I've tried everything. Until a few years ago, I found a way to significantly stabilize my skin. I'm not a doctor, and this is not medical advice. My background is in engineering and physics. That's why it's important to me to look at the data on the questions that matter, to honestly tell you what helps and where there's no clear answer yet. Maybe you feel the same way I do. Before you spend money on a product and commit to it for weeks, you first want to know, is there actually something to it? Is it worth the effort? That's exactly what I wanted to know too. And that's when I came across a fascinating study. The study examined 30 adults with eczema in a quiet phase though, without an active flare, and in a clever way. One arm goes into a 5% Dead Sea salt solution, the other one into plain tap water, on the same person. That means everything that affects the whole body, stress, diet, genetics, affects both arms equally. What did the measurements show? Let's first look at the arm in the tap water. Many people worry that water dries out the skin. In the study, the skin condition stayed stable. It didn't get better, but the water alone didn't massively dry out the skin either. And the arm in the Dead Sea salt solution? This is where it gets interesting. The water loss through the skin, this is basically diffusion, water moving from the inside out, was 19% lower on the salt arm compared to the tap water side. That means your skin loses less moisture to the air. The barrier becomes tighter, and the hydration was 14% higher on the salt arm compared to the water arm. So the skin was measurably more hydrated. Imagine your skin barrier suddenly having fewer gaps. Moisture stays instead of evaporating. The skin on the salt arm became significantly smoother. According to the study, even 40%. But I'd rather show you the chart so you can see for yourself how big the difference really is. The tap water also smoothed the skin a bit, but the salt arm was clearly smoother. And the redness on the salt arm decreased significantly. Sounds really good at first, but is that enough? Can we just trust these results? Can I now conclude that Dead Sea salt at home will help my eczema too? Before I get into that, first, heads off. The study design is clever, and the 4 measurements are objectively measured, with technical instruments and not just questionnaires. That's solid work, but when we look more closely, there are a few things that we shouldn't ignore. The authors write that the study was double-blinded, meaning neither the researchers nor the patients supposedly knew which bucket contained the water and which the salt. But honestly, if I put a 5% salt solution on my skin, I can feel it. The skin feels noticeably smoother on one arm than the other. At that point, the patient knows which arm was in the salt. Whether the patients were really completely unaware, we can at least question that. But even if the patients knew what was on the arm, the measurements were done objectively. Right? Okay, stop. At this point, we need to zoom in for a moment. The spread in the data is large. What works well for one person doesn't necessarily mean anything for another. Eczema doesn't have just one cause. It depends on many factors. On average though, the Dead Sea salt was clearly ahead. And now a fundamental point. All 4 measurements in this study, water loss, roughness, hydration, redness, are biophysical skin parameters. That means they were measured with instruments on the skin surface. They tell us something about the condition on your skin barrier, but they do not measure whether your itching improved or your quality of life increased. The very things that bother us the most. In dermatology, there's an established system for that, the SCORAD score. It captures not just how the skin looks, but also how severe the itching is and how much sleep suffers because of it. But now there's a completely different question. Does this even apply to the Dead Sea salt you buy in the store? This is the point that stuck with me the most, and I have to be completely honest, this study doesn't really answer our original question at all. Look at the title of the study, Bathing in a Magnesium-Rich Dead Sea Salt Solution. That sounds like Dead Sea salt, right? But when you look more closely at what the researchers actually used, it was a special deep layer salt from the Dead Sea, standardized to a whopping 46% magnesium chloride. That's almost pure magnesium chloride, essentially magnesium flakes. And to be fully accurate with you, what I showed you at the beginning of this video was a solution made from exactly those kind of magnesium flakes, not regular Dead Sea salt. And one of the authors works directly for the manufacturer of the tested product. The title creates an expectation that the study doesn't deliver on. That this study exists at all is valuable, but what they actually tested, you need to look closely. This is not a Dead Sea salt that you buy in the store. Regular Dead Sea salt contains a broad mix of mineral salts, as even Paz and Shani showed us. But it does show that magnesium-rich salt from the Dead Sea can measurably help eczema. However, attributing the effect solely to the magnesium chloride isn't possible, because even the flakes still contain traces of other mineral salts. The obvious question is, of course, should I order magnesium flakes now? I can't give you a definitive answer here, but the combination of regular Dead Sea salt with additional magnesium flakes I find personally exciting. There will be a dedicated video on that. And if you're wondering whether tap water is really as harmless as the study suggests, I have my own experiences with that, but that's another story. So, can Dead Sea salt at home measurably help your eczema? The study says yes. A magnesium-rich salt from the Dead Sea can, but it's more complicated than the title suggests. I hope you got something out of this and that you feel a bit understood. You are not alone in this. I also always want to emphasize that today's video is just one small piece of the puzzle, because skin problems are multi-causal. If you're dealing with skin issues like eczema, atopic dermatitis, or acne, and you'd like personal support, I offer individual guidance, not as a replacement for your doctor, but as a complement. You will find my contact details right in the video description. All the best, your Stefan.